I wanted to begin and say, Dr. Atkins, from your seat, and each of you from your seats, if you would like to begin, thank you for setting us off on the great nutrition debate.
Right from my seat. Okay. I've got a lot to say, not a lot of time to say it, so I'm not going to be very sociable. After analyzing virtually every scientific paper written on the low-carbohydrate diet over the last 80 years, beginning with when it was first offered as a treatment for epilepsy, I am convinced that a diet low enough in carbohydrate to automatically convert our stored fat into the body's primary energy fuel is qualified at present to be considered the treatment of choice for obesity and related conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, and atherosclerosis. I know that to gain mainstream acceptance of this proposal, I must first demonstrate that the nutritional program, which I believe can put an end to the lion's share of obesity right now, is both safe and effective over both the short and the long term. So in the brief time allotted, let me do just that. First, PowerPoint. This is how the Atkins diet works. Now, I can't see if the PowerPoint is up. Can you put it on the monitor there so I can see that it's there? Stored fat is, after carbohydrate, the body's backup fuel system. The human body cannot store more than a 2-day supply of carbohydrate. In the absence of dietary carbohydrate, fat becomes the primary fuel. It's next on the pecking order. This metabolic changeover is supported by biochemical catalysts which facilitate the steady burning of fat, producing more energy, increased well-being, and a dramatic loss of appetite. Next. What are ketones? They're simply the energy fuels derived from our fat stores. Fat delivers energy via ketones just as carbohydrate delivers energy by way of glucose. Enzymes are present within all our cells, including our brain cells, to convert ketones into usable fuel. Next. When ketones are used as fuel, the most consistent finding is a decrease in appetite. Insulin is not involved in ketone production. Thus, the consequences of elevated insulin, which are many, there are increases in triglycerides, in blood pressure, in adrenaline, in cortisol, all of these are avoided. Obese individuals and people who are overweight are keto resistant. Pay attention to this term, but what it means is that there will be no accumulation of ketones in the blood. Next. The best documentation of keto resistance was brought to us by two very important researchers, the department heads at London's Middlesex Hospital, Alan Keckwick and Gaston Pawan. In their documentation, they showed that obese subjects given the ketogenic diet that I'll tell you about momentarily, produced a flat level of ketones rising from 2 milligrams to an average of 4 milligrams, never more than 6, whereas the non-obese subjects had their ketones escalate rapidly. This is one reason why overweight people will never have problems with ketosis. But ketosis is a negative catchword for many people. The only reason can possibly be that they're confusing it with diabetic ketoacidosis. Next slide. But look how diametrically opposed they are. Ketoacidosis occurs in type 1 diabetes, meaning it occurs because of an insulin absence or an insulin deficiency. Benign ketosis is achieved in overweight subjects whose metabolism is characterized by the fact that they put out too much insulin. Ketoacidosis is caused by an increased intake of carbohydrate. Benign ketosis by a decreased intake of carbohydrate. There is, of course, acidosis in ketoacidosis, but in benign dietary ketosis, the pH is normal. There is no acidosis. In ketoacidosis, patients are extremely symptomatic, and in ketosis, the subjects describe an improvement in well-being. Now, that's pretty different. Don't let anybody confuse it ever again. Much of the success of the low-carbohydrate diet is that it is extremely effective for people with large appetites who enjoy eating. And these are the two main reasons why. First, hunger is eliminated. Hunger is not even allowed. Hunger is eliminated because the biochemical changes I will outline momentarily reduce the appetite. Secondly, and this is something that bears emphasis, more weight is lost on low-carbohydrate diets than on balanced diets identical in calories. This benefit is called metabolic advantage. And we're going to look at these two phenomena right now. First, we'll look at the hunger aspect. The guru of fasting, next slide. The guru of fasting is a weight loss system, Dr. Garfield Duncan. Back in the 60s, when fasting was in vogue, he described a dramatic decrease in hunger after the second day of a fast. He attributed this to high levels of ketones. In his words, in every case, there was a relationship between hyperketonemia and loss of appetite. In 1963, Walter Lyons Bloom, next slide, it's not a slide, but anyway, Walter Lyons Bloom and Gordon Azar in Atlanta discovered that the same degree of ketosis could be achieved simply by eating protein and fat-containing foods and eliminating carbohydrate. There was no need to fast. Instead of a fast, a meat and salad diet would do the trick. Therefore, carbohydrate restriction will suppress the appetite. Bloom and Azar's paper convinced me to go on the only diet I've ever been on. That was 36 years ago, and I'm still counting, and I'm still on it. But here's the second point. Is a calorie really true? This axiom that everybody repeats, is it really true? The truly significant breakthrough came from Kekwik and Pawan. After a series of animal experiments, including the discovery that rats on a low-carbohydrate diet put out a fat-mobilizing substance which, when injected into other animals, caused an automatic weight loss, they directed their attention to obese humans. Two groundbreaking studies were published in '56. Next. First, they studied 1,000-calorie diets, but it was a research study that they had done on rats, and this is what they did. There were diets 90% fat, 90% protein, 90% carbohydrate. They wanted to see the effect. 1,000 calories of 90% carbohydrate produced no weight loss. As a matter of fact, there was a slight weight gain. The 90% protein diet produced a weight loss between 3.5 and 4 pounds in the week that people followed it. The 90% fat diet did even better. Between 5 and 6 pounds of weight were lost. And that is a dramatic portrayal of how different foods can lead to different amounts of weight loss. But of course these were all 1,000 calorie diets, and they wanted to look at diets with sufficient calories not to provide guaranteed weight loss. Next. So look at this one. Look at this one. For an average of 8 days, 6 subjects were alternated between a 2,000 calorie balanced diet and a 2,600 low carbohydrate diet. The 2,000 calorie balanced diet led to a 1 pound weight gain, as you see on this slide, whereas the 2,600 calorie low carbohydrate diet given to this very same subjects, it was a crossover study, produced a 3 pound weight loss in the same amount of time. And Kekwik and Pawan did water balance studies, and it wasn't water. The mathematics, a half a pound of day more weight loss is 1,750 calories of advantage, plus the 600 in the extra food. This provided an edge totaling 2,350 calories per day. That means they demonstrated for the first time a phenomenon called metabolic advantage, a refutation of the calorie theory where diets of different compositions lead to disproportionate weight loss. Kekwik and Pawan, despite their important academic position, were met with skepticism. But 9 years later, Dr. Fred Benoit and his colleagues at Oakland Naval Hospital furthered the concept. Their technology allowed them to measure body fat. And this is what they found. Next. They compared a total fast, which certainly was in vogue in those days, with a 1,000 calorie, 10 gram, very low carbohydrate diet for 10 days. They found that the fasting took off 21 pounds, but only 7.5 of those pounds were fat. The other 14 were lean body mass. The low carbohydrate diet, despite the extra 1,000 calories, took off 14.5 pounds, all but 1/2 pound of which was fat. Virtually none was lean body mass. Again, it met with skepticism, but it was quite logical. In starvation, you will start to burn your protein for fuel, but when ample fat and protein are included in the diet, there will be no need to do so. More skepticism and more studies. This time, the professor of medical nutrition at Cornell, Dr. Charlotte Young, studied 8 obese 23-year-old men, undergraduates at Cornell and graduate students at Cornell. They were all overweight, and she used an 1,800 calorie diet. May I see the next? An 1,800 calorie diet of differing amounts of carbohydrate. One was 104, moderately low, one was 60, even lower, and the other was 30 grams of carbohydrate a day. She also did body fat estimations. This is how much body fat they lost. 2 pounds a week for the 9 weeks on the 104-gram diet, 2.5 pounds a week on the 60-gram diet, and 3.6 pounds per week on the 30-gram diet. This means that cutting down from 60 to 30 grams, from low to even lower, without cutting calories, led to an extra 10.5 pounds of fat being lost in the 9 weeks of the study. I hope I've proven that the diet is effective. So now, let's turn our attention to the safety. Over the years, I've heard myriad concerns, but very little in the way of observed complaints. In fact, in 1973, the AMA requested that its members be on the lookout for adverse effects from my diet and report them to AMA headquarters. 3 years later, when we checked, despite the fact that millions had been on my diet, no examples of adverse reactions were in their files. None. Some complaints, by the way, that organs, such as the kidneys or the liver, are damaged by the diet must be dismissed immediately as being total inventions, fashioned out of the whole cloth. Not a single case of kidney or liver damage was ever reported, even as an isolated case history. The major issue then seems to be the speculation that it would be bad for the heart. I hope you agree that it's not the cholesterol and fat in the diet that leads to heart disease, but rather the cholesterol and fat in the blood. If so, we can review the changes in the lipid profile on low-carbohydrate diets. They fall into a common pattern. The total cholesterol usually drops a bit, and there's usually a tendency for the HDL to rise and the LDL to fall, much as a recent study out of Wilmington, Delaware, on a modified low-carbohydrate diet shows. Next. In this particular, I don't know where the slide is, but here we go. In this particular study, all the lipid variables moved in the right direction. You will notice that these people lost a lot of weight, and the first group that I'm about to show you, the changes were fairly dramatic. Next one. Another group was done with more people who lost very little weight, but they had a major effect on their blood sugar. They were diabetics. However, again, every single one of the parameters, the cholesterol, the triglycerides, the LDL, all went down and the HDL went up. Okay, now most of the other studies throughout the years, and I've reviewed the literature, and it goes back to the 50s and 60s, there are about 10 of them, report a striking improvement in triglycerides particularly. And I want to talk about triglycerides because this is much more important than you might imagine. It's logical, by the way, that it should be beneficial in controlling triglycerides because body fat, biochemically, is triglyceride, and we know that the diet causes a loss of body fat. The first demonstration of this, next, was very dramatic, and it dates back to 1966. It was done at Harvard, P.K. Roussel and his colleagues. That doesn't look like it. Better do one more. Is that it? I can't see it. The subjects had very high triglycerides in RECELL study. Their triglycerides ranged from 500 and up, and a typical fall was from 1,300 down to 300. And then there were many, many other studies which I don't have time to show, but you can be sure that high triglycerides are corrected by a low-carbohydrate diet. The impact of, may I see the next slide? No, we are, all right, we'll leave that one. The impact of high triglycerides cannot be underestimated. Let's look at another Harvard study, this one very recent, published in Circulation, October '97. Gaziano was a senior article. He took 340 patients who survived a myocardial infarction and got out of the hospital. They were compared with age and sex-matched controls. Of all the lipids studied, and they studied every lipid there was, they were most fascinated by the elevation of triglycerides combined with a low level of the good cholesterol, the HDL. This is what the study showed. They divided them into quartiles of this ratio, triglyceride to HDL. The lowest quartile, or the most ideal number, so to speak, was given a factor of 1. He was assigned that number. Then 4.1 times more of that group in the second quartile were in the heart attack group, 5.8 times in the third quartile, but in the fourth quartile, the upper 25%, there was 16 times more likelihood of being in the heart attack group if you had high triglycerides combined with low HDL. This is the most powerful risk factor for heart disease ever described. If you look at what cholesterol does, it's maybe 2 to 1. If you look at what homocysteine does, maybe 5 to 1. But 16 to 1, this is what you must be looking for if you want to reverse heart disease. Next PowerPoint. The importance of high triglycerides, then, is that they are perhaps the most important cardio risk factor at all. But they are a known surrogate marker for hyperinsulinism. Now, we haven't talked about hyperinsulinism, but a lot of people have. High triglycerides and low HDL are surrogates for this phenomenon. You do see, by the way, the same incidence of high heart attack rates when you study insulin levels as well. Even more important is that triglycerides are a known responder to carbohydrate restriction. Now, next, we've done a retrospective study on 319 subjects at the Atkins Center. I'm going to really skip most of it. We don't have time. I just want to point out that in the group of 85 people who had triglycerides of over 150, the value 1 year later was less than 50% of what it was at the beginning of the study. Just go the next two, skip the next one, and we'll go on to the next. To dismiss the complaint that the Atkins diet skimps on fruits and vegetables, I would like to point out that it is nutritionally naive to lump fruits and vegetables together. There is a wide variance in their phytochemical content. In my latest book, Age Defying, I deal with this issue. Carbohydrates per se are not nutritionally essential, only the phytochemicals that they contain. Future dieters will be instructed to select foods with a high antioxidant to carbohydrate ratio. The best phytochemicals act as antioxidants, and this is a very good study. By the way, it was done out of Tufts, and I wonder if it was done from the USDA. I hope it was, because this work is very, very valuable. Let's look at the PowerPoint that shows it. There are two of them. I can't see whether that's on or not, but...
That's the retrospective study.
Then one more. Yeah, I know it's in color. Okay. These are the foods that have the highest ratio of antioxidants done by the Tufts study per gram of carbohydrate. Look at fruits and vegetables were studied. Go to the next one just briefly and then back to this one. All right, now you see there's a lot of blue in the next one. That's the lower half. Back to the previous one. And you see that the top of the list are foods like garlic, kale, onions, leafy greens, spinach. These are the foods with the highest ratios. The only fruits on the list were berries. If we now turn to the next list, you're going to see the bottom of the list. You're going to see that things like apples and pears and bananas have a reading of 0.2, and yet kale a reading of 6.5. So that if you pick the right green vegetables, you will do 30 times better than if you pick the wrong fruits. One leaf of lettuce has double the antioxidant power as an entire banana. And so let's no longer lump fruits and vegetables together. Let's learn to be selective and pick the vegetables that work. All right, next PowerPoint. And now we have to deal with the accusation that the Atkins diet is low in vitamin and mineral content. Here's an example of a 2,000 calorie version of my strictest diet from the standpoint of carbohydrate. Only has 20 grams. Starts with a 3-egg omelet, avocado and cheese and tomato and 2 strips of bacon and so on. You can read the rest. I hope you can. I can't from here, but maybe you can. All right. I want to show how it measures up to the RDI, which stands for the recommended daily intake of 12 different vitamins. Next, please. You see that black line? That's 100%. These are 12 vitamins. 9 of the vitamins go way over that line. 2 of them are virtually at the line, and only one, panacetic acid, is at the 50% mark. And it's a question of whether we can do better. Now, I personally believe in nutritional supplements for everyone. I believe that people on the food pyramid diet need nutritional supplements a lot more than people on the Atkins diet. And so if I tell people to take nutritional supplements, it's not because my diet is inadequate. It's because they were on an inadequate diet before they started my diet. Okay, now the main question about the long-term studies. No one has one. There are no long-term studies showing that any diet for weight reduction is both effective and safe. Mostly, it's not hard to show that they're safe, by the way, but none have been shown to be effective. To be effective, they must be followed. They must be easy and pleasant enough to follow. The recidivism rate of most diets falls into the 95% range, which indicates that very few people want to follow them. I predict that my diet will be the first diet to achieve the long-term effectiveness award. And the reason is, let's see the next PowerPoint. The reason is that it is easy to follow. It's easy to comply with. You're never hungry. You have a metabolic advantage. You can take in more calories than you can on other diets and still lose weight. You can go to restaurants, order from the best of the main courses. You can eat in luxuriously, and it will correct an awful lot of other health problems. It will correct diabetes, hypertension, most of the risk factors for heart disease, gastritis, esophageal reflux disorder, headaches, and a variety of other problems. And for all of these reasons, I hope, the reason I'm here, by the way, is to help the people of our nation and of our planet. And I hope that this misinformation that people have had to abide by, all of the statements that a low-carbohydrate diet is scientifically unsupported, I hope we've put an end to that this morning. And I hope that some government official will decide, okay, it's pretty clear that long-term studies are going to have to be funded by the government, and that they will do that. And when they do, they will begin to get some exciting results, much as Dr. Eric Westman has gotten in his short-term studies, and I hope we can hear from him. Thank you.